You know what ancient Rome and modern-day New York have in common? Street lighting, plumbing, public toilets, road markings, and even food delivery. Seriously. They wouldn't deliver pizza, of course, but hot meals. Absolutely. Just not on a scooter, more like on the shoulders of a slave or a porter. Most people imagine ancient Romans as guys in togas, picking their teeth with sticks and arguing about philosophy under marble columns. Sure, they did some philosophizing. But they were also building homes with heated floors, designing multi-level shopping centers, and staging engineering shows that would make today's architects lose their minds. Picture this: you're living in a house made of concrete. Not just stacked stones and mud, real concrete. And not the kind that crumbles after 50 years, Roman concrete has survived for over 2,000. Meanwhile, modern buildings need repairs after just 100. They had hot water. Saunas. Yes. Fountains in the streets. Not for decoration, but actual drinking fountains. And all of it worked without electricity, powered by gravity and brilliant engineering that still baffles modern scientists. And then there's the Colosseum. It wasn't just a stadium, it was a high-tech entertainment trap. Beneath the arena was an underground city of hand-powered elevators, cages, and trapdoors, a mechanical system that could instantly change the scenery. Broadway-level stagecraft, 2,000 years ago. Animals appeared right on cue from hidden hatches. The machinery was so complex, it resembled a massive clockwork system. Automatic doors. Yep. Heron of Alexandria created doors that opened by themselves when fire was lit, using steam pressure. Basically, the ancestor of today's supermarket doors. And get this, vending machines. Drop a coin, get a portion of holy water. Heron made that too, the first vending machine, over 1,000 years before Coca-Cola. And let's talk about their concrete again. Roman concrete didn't just stand the test of time, it actually got stronger with age. They used volcanic ash, which reacted with seawater to reinforce the structure. Modern engineers are only now figuring out how it worked. Still think people back then were primitive? Then picture Emperor Nero's Golden House. It had rotating ceilings that dropped rose petals on guests. Mechanisms that sprayed perfumes into the air. And the rotating dome. It used ball bearings. Ball bearings, in the 1st century. So next time you hit the gym, take a hot shower, and order takeout, remember, the ancient Romans were doing all of that. Just in togas. And with slightly worse Wi-Fi. But Rome wasn't just about luxury and clever gadgets, it was a machine of survival, efficiency, and control. Let's talk infrastructure. You know how we brag about our highways and logistics? The Romans had 400,000 kilometers of roads. 400,000, and over 80,000 of those were paved. That's enough to circle the earth, twice. And these weren't just dusty tracks. These were engineered, multi-layered, cambered roads, built to drain rainwater and last centuries. Some of them are still in use today. Modern roads develop potholes in a year. Roman roads? Try 2000. Then there's the postal system. Yes, Rome had a government-backed postal service. Couriers on horseback delivering messages at speeds that rival some modern services. They had relay stations with fresh horses every few miles. Bureaucracy has never moved so fast. And sanitation? Roman cities had massive sewer systems. The Cloaca Maxima in Rome, one of the oldest sewers in the world, is still partially functioning today. Public toilets with running water. Bathhouses that could hold thousands of people. Central heating. You name it. But maybe the most mind-blowing thing? Urban planning. Roman cities were designed with grid layouts, zoning laws, public squares, marketplaces, and even fire brigades. Yes, fire departments, with trained firefighters and equipment. After the Great Fire of Rome, Emperor Augustus created a special corps called the Vigiles. Think of them as the ancient version of 911. And their buildings? Romans were building 6, sometimes even 7-story apartment blocks called insulae. Packed with families, shops, bakeries, and bathhouses. Crowded, noisy, full of life, kind of like a Roman version of Manhattan. Only with more yelling in Latin. They even had building codes. Fire walls. Regulations on how high a building could be. And if you think your landlord is bad, imagine renting an apartment in an insula, with thin wooden floors, oil lamps, and no elevators. Yet somehow, people lived, worked, and thrived there. For centuries. Rome wasn't just a city. It was a system. An idea. A blueprint for how to run a civilization when you don't have electricity, just brains, muscle, and 400,000 kilometers of stone. And if you think the Romans were all work and no play, think again. These people knew how to entertain themselves. Their theaters were acoustic masterpieces. You could sit in the back row of a 10,000-seat amphitheater and still hear the actor whispering on stage. No microphones. Just perfect sound design. And gladiator games? Sure, they were brutal. But they weren't mindless violence. They were choreographed, ritualized, and designed as massive public spectacles. The Colosseum had retractable awnings, called the Valerium, to shade up to 50,000 spectators from the sun. It also had ticketing systems, assigned seating by social class, food vendors, and crowd control strategies we still use in modern stadiums. They even had halftime shows, naval battles, mythological reenactments, and wild animal exhibitions, all staged with mechanical lifts and stage tricks that would make Las Vegas jealous. Imagine watching a forest emerge from the arena floor, with deer leaping out and hunters in costume chasing them, all while the audience eats snacks and places bets. But how did Romans stay informed? Newspapers? Not quite. They had the Acta Diurna, the daily, public acts, etched on stone or metal and displayed in busy areas for people to read. Political updates, trial outcomes, battle reports, even marriage announcements. The ancient equivalent of Twitter carved in stone. And graffiti? It wasn't just scribbles. It was how people communicated, joked, advertised, and complained. You'd walk into a bar in Pompeii and see things like, "I screwed the barmaid," or, "Beware of Marcus, he cheats at dice." Graffiti included political messages, love notes, satire, business ads. It was their version of social media, complete with trolling and all. They even had takeout. You could grab a hot meal at a thermopolium, which was basically an ancient Roman fast food joint. They served wine, stew, bread, sometimes even delicacies like dormice or honey-glazed ham. Think of it like McDonald's, but with more amphorae and fewer golden arches. And don't forget the water. Aqueducts carried fresh water for miles, feeding fountains, homes, bathhouses, and even industrial workshops. Some aqueducts flowed for over 90 kilometers, dropping less than a meter in elevation. That's not just smart, that's precision engineering. The more you look, the more you realize, we didn't invent civilization. We just upgraded the interface. Now let's talk about Roman science, medicine, and technology. If you think they were just stabbing people with swords and praying to Jupiter for healing, think again. Roman doctors performed cataract surgery. Yes, eye surgery, in the 1st century. They used a procedure called couching, where a fine needle pushed the cloudy lens out of the way to restore partial vision. Not perfect, sure, but still better than bumping into every column in the forum. Surgical tools. They had entire kits, scalpels, forceps, bone drills, even vaginal speculums made from bronze. Tools so advanced that modern surgeons instantly recognize them. Some were even sterilized using boiling water or alcohol. They understood the importance of clean water and fresh air in preventing disease, even if they didn't quite know what bacteria were. Their public health system was huge. Aqueducts brought clean water, sewers carried away waste, bathhouses encouraged hygiene, and cities had inspectors monitoring water quality. And don't forget Galen, the Roman Empire's most famous physician. He dissected animals to study anatomy and wrote medical texts so influential they were used for over 1,000 years. Sure, some of his ideas were wrong, like the belief in four humors, but his observations of nerves, the spinal cord, and the circulatory system were centuries ahead of their time. But Romans didn't just look inward, they looked to the stars. Their engineers used gnomons and sundials to measure time with surprising accuracy. Some Roman calendars even accounted for leap years. Julius Caesar himself reformed the calendar, creating the Julian system, the backbone of our modern calendar. That's right, your birthday still runs on Roman software. And robotics? Heron of Alexandria, a Greek engineer living in Roman Egypt, designed machines powered by steam, air pressure, and gravity. He built automatic temple doors, coin-operated machines, and even programmable puppets. One of his machines told short stories using gears, ropes, and weights, basically, the world's first mechanical theater. It wasn't science fiction. It was real. In the 1st century. And when it came to logistics, they were unmatched. Rome had warehouses, poria, with temperature regulation, grain silos with rat-proofing, and a shipping empire with scheduled routes across the Mediterranean. They even had something resembling container shipping, amphorae designed to stack efficiently inside ships. Supply chains, medicine, surgery, hydraulics, robotics, and all powered not by electricity, but by math, muscle, and mastery. Let's talk about one of the most jaw-dropping feats in ancient naval history, a warship so massive, so absurdly huge, it makes modern aircraft carriers look, not small, but maybe slightly less impressive. The year? Around 200 BCE. The ruler? Ptolemy IV of Egypt, technically a Greek, but ruling a Roman-influenced Hellenistic empire. The project? A floating fortress called the Tesseracontaries, which literally means 40-rower. Spoiler, it had way more than 40. This wasn't a ship. It was a building that happened to float. The Tesseracontaries was around 130 meters long, roughly the length of two Boeing 737s parked nose to nose. It stood over 20 meters tall, about the height of a 6-story building. The thing was so wide and heavy, historians still argue about whether it could sail at all, or if it just floated near shore like a floating base of terror. The crew? Over 7,000 people. Yes, 7,000. That included 4,000 rowers, spread across multiple levels with oars staggered at different angles like a mechanical bird's wings. It also held 400 sailors and about 2,800 soldiers. Imagine the noise when this thing moved, if it ever moved. Some believe it was powered by dual hulls, with rows of synchronized oarsmen. Others think it was towed or anchored as a stationary battle platform. Either way, when this floating monster appeared from the morning mist, it must have looked like an entire city was sailing toward you. The weight? An estimated 4,000 tons. And this was built 2,200 years ago, without steel, cranes, or modern dry docks. So why build something like this? Was it practical? Not at all. It was a flex. A floating mic drop. A demonstration of power, wealth, and divine ambition. It didn't matter if it sailed well. It made a statement, we can build this. What can you do? And that's the thing about the ancient world, it wasn't always about efficiency. Sometimes it was about awe. About showing the gods and your enemies that you could reshape the world with wood, bronze, and sheer human will. You think modern engineers are impressive? Sure, we've got satellites, AI, and concrete mixers. But the Romans? They had chisels, slaves, math, and a borderline insane obsession with permanence. And somehow, they pulled off miracles. Let's start with water, the single most important resource for any civilization. The Romans didn't just use water, they commanded it. They built aqueducts that stretched dozens of kilometers, crossing valleys, rivers, and even mountains, just to supply fresh water to cities. Some aqueducts dropped only 30 centimeters per kilometer, that's a slope so precise it still amazes modern engineers. And they didn't use pumps. Just gravity. Pure, elegant physics. In fact, the Aqua Marcia, one of Rome's longest aqueducts, was 91 kilometers long and carried water from mountain springs all the way to Rome. It was built in 144 BCE and parts of it are still in use today. How's that for quality assurance? And where did all that water go? Public fountains, of course. Bathhouses. Latrines. But also, artificial lakes, gardens, and even air-conditioned villas. Yes, you read that right. Some Roman elite homes had air conditioning. They would run cool water through the walls and floors to regulate temperature. In desert regions like Baiae and parts of North Africa, this wasn't a luxury. It was survival. Speaking of the desert, let's talk about climate engineering. Emperor Hadrian ordered the construction of massive reservoirs, underground cisterns, and even entire man-made lakes to provide water in dry regions. In some places, Roman engineers tunneled through hills and redirected entire rivers just to make cities livable. And then, there's the concrete. We've talked about it before, but here's what makes it crazier: Roman underwater concrete gets stronger over time. Modern concrete. It cracks, erodes, weakens. But Roman marine concrete, made with volcanic ash and lime, reacts with seawater and grows new minerals over the centuries. It literally heals itself. That's why Roman piers, harbors, and lighthouses, like the massive port at Cosa or the underwater breakwaters in Caesarea, are still standing. 2,000 years later. In saltwater. And let's not forget their tunnels. Romans cut through entire mountains to build roads. The Furlo Tunnel in Italy. Built in the 1st century CE, it's still used today. They dug it with hand tools, chiseling through solid rock, just to shave a few kilometers off a trade route. No dynamite. No drills. Just persistence. These weren't isolated projects. The Romans did this everywhere. From Britain to Syria. From the Alps to the Sahara. They built an infrastructure so durable, so intelligently designed, that parts of it still serve humanity today. So next time you complain about a pothole or a broken bridge, remember. Some of the world's oldest roads, bridges, sewers, and aqueducts were built by men in tunics, with no electricity, no modern machines, and they're still working. When you think Roman legions, you probably imagine disciplined soldiers with swords and shields. But behind every victorious campaign was a hidden hero: Roman military engineering. The army wasn't just fighters, they were builders, innovators, and logistics masters. Need a bridge to cross a raging river? No problem. The Romans invented the portable, modular pontoon bridge, a floating bridge made of boats and planks that could be assembled in hours. Julius Caesar famously used these to surprise enemies by crossing rivers thought impassable. Need to besiege a city? Forget brute force alone. The Romans brought siege towers, towering wooden structures on wheels, sometimes as tall as 30 meters, complete with drawbridges to storm city walls. These were combined with catapults, ballistae, and battering rams that could pulverize stone fortifications. And speaking of fortifications, Roman military camps were masterpieces of urban planning. They were laid out in perfect grids, with streets, latrines, headquarters, barracks, and even bakeries. Every camp was a small city designed for defense and efficiency, built overnight by the soldiers themselves. But what about communication across the vast empire? They didn't have telephones or radios, but they had something just as effective: a system of relay stations and signal towers that allowed messages to travel hundreds of kilometers in a matter of hours. On hilltops and mountain peaks, Roman soldiers lit fires or used reflective bronze mirrors to send coded signals, flashes of light visible for miles. This was an ancient optical telegraph. For example, during wars, a single message could be relayed from one end of the empire to another with remarkable speed. Add to this a vast network of well-maintained roads and couriers on horseback, and you have an empire that could coordinate armies, trade, and governance across continents without modern electronics. There's even evidence that some elite units used water clocks and mechanical devices to time synchronized operations, kind of like early computers running programs to coordinate attacks. The Romans were masters of combining technology, engineering, and organization to build not just monuments, but a living, breathing empire that lasted centuries.